All right, bye-bye. Right, must listen a little bit later than normal. My sincere apologies to the wonderful one and only Clare Freeman. Thank you so much for being in and waiting.
Hey, no worries.
So this week, one of everybody's favourites, British crime podcasts. What have you got for us?
Yeah, true crime is one of those things that people love to listen to. Apparently women particularly love listening to women serial killers. Top of the list, it's in the top of the podcast charts at the moment. It's a BBC radio production. It's called The Missing Cryptoqueen. I think maybe we can play a clip of it, which kind of gives you a feel of it.
It was impossible not to be impressed by Dr. Ruja. She appeared on the front cover of prestigious business magazines. She has degrees from Oxford and Constance University and is fluent in several languages.
So I think what is unique about OneCoin, point one, is we target the mass market. So the idea was how to bring a good concept, an interesting concept, out to the people.
Dr. Ruja promised banking for the unbanked, a financial revolution unshackled from banking controls. She wanted to democratise money. Bigger, better and safer than Bitcoin. And if you invest in OneCoin, you can become rich beyond your wildest dreams. The following year, word about OneCoin was starting to spread. Rumours circulated in Facebook and WhatsApp groups about an amazing new cryptocurrency that was going to replace Bitcoin and the remarkable woman behind it.
We are 1 year old. When Bitcoin was 1 year old, their price was 15 cents. Nobody cared about Bitcoin. Oh, I lost 100 coins, what is it? Oh, I don't care. 15 euro, gone. We are 1 year old and we already wrote history.
Dr. Ruja started appearing at events all over the world, spreading the OneCoin gospel, arguing with bankers and gaining legions of devoted followers. And always dressed in silk gowns, diamonds and her signature red lipstick. Try to imagine a cross between Belle from Beauty and the Beast and Steve Jobs.
We have been growing very, very fast. Sometimes people even come to me and say, but Dr. Ruja, did I miss the opportunity? Is it over? What do we do now? And the answer is, actually, this is just the beginning.
There is so much about this, isn't there, that is encapsulated, that encapsulates the world in which we live. The way that digital currency has just gone so far ahead of what we could have expected. For example, the fear of missing out, the idea of being able to scam in that world. It's great.
I mean, I really credit Jamie Bartlett and Georgia Catt who've put this together, because there's times where you listening, you think, gosh, they go to a beauty pageant, and they sound terrified, surrounded by all these businessmen smoking cigars, sticking out like sore thumbs. And even when they put the first 2 episodes out, and Jamie did an interview in Victoria, Derbyshire, there was some videos put on social media saying it was BBC propaganda. But what I like about this series is there's only 8 episodes, but they're clearly reacting, whilst they've taken 8 months to put it together, they're reacting to what the listeners are responding with. And they're finding, as they put the series out, that more people who potentially fell victim to OneCoin are starting to kind of contact them. So it feels like the series is very current. It's adapting to what's happening even as they release it, which is really exciting, because could have just basically written the script for this and put it out as it was in April, but they're moulding and changing it as they go through. It's just, I mean, for me, it is the best podcast series I've listened to in, a couple of years. It's
really that good?
What's even the details for this, right? When you come to the music, and I know this as a producer that this stuff matters. The music is even the London Bulgaria choir with a soloist, because Dr. Ruja, who the thing's about, is Bulgarian.
Yeah.
So I love the attention to detail for that.
She went to ground, didn't she, in 2017, just as the law were trying to get wind of what was going on.
She disappeared, or did she? That's the question that they're trying to
Her brother's been detained as well, hasn't he, by the FBI?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, but all credit to them for having the balls to kind of go out to some of these places. Because I think, to be honest, most of us would just want to do a phone call, maybe not go to the yacht where she was last seen.
Maybe not a beauty pageant in Romania. It might be a bit niche. That's fab. That sounds really, really good. Your second choice is Missing.
Yeah, so this one actually goes back 2015, 2016. A chap called Tim Weaver, who is an author, actually. He's written several books on for crime, fiction. He's researched this stuff inside out. But his podcast series was a little bit different. Tying on from that missing theme of missing Cryptoqueen, I thought, it reminds me of this. He set out to kind of work out whether people in the 21st century can actually disappear. Like, when you go social media and all this kind of stuff, phone tracking, a bit like those TV series Hunted. So it's really interesting how deep and detailed he gets in looking at it from all angles, and even nearer the end of the series sets himself the task of whether he can disappear.
Let's have a listen. This is Tim Weaver at the opening of Missing.
I'd spent long hours researching real-life cases, speaking to experts in the field and trying to understand the psychology of people who vanish. I thought I knew this area well, but as it turned out, I'd only really scratched the surface. In Missing, I'm going to find out why people disappear, the reasons and the motivations. I'm going to find out what it's like once you've made that leap, how easy it is to stay off the radar, the rules you have to live by and the ways in which you could be found. I'm going to talk to the agencies involved in finding the missing and bringing them home again, to psychology experts about the patterns and errors in human behaviour, to a man who interviews serial killers for a living, a woman who charts the terrifying ways in which we're being watched every minute of every day, and a former skip tracer who now helps people vanish for a living. And finally, I'm going to attempt to answer the biggest question of them all. Is it actually possible to disappear for good?
It's mad, isn't it, really? I mean, some of the stats that they kind of even say in that first episode, 250,000 people go missing every year in the UK. 80% are found in the first 24 hours and 99% of cases are resolved within a year. So it's just this 1% where they remain unsolved, and that's what he's looking at why. But really interesting, and for to kind of get inside the minds of what goes into the research for a crime fiction writer as well. Really fascinating.
And does he find that they are generally people that have been killed, or are they people that have made themselves disappear?
There is one particular episode where he interviews an expert who helps people go missing.
Well, that's the most interesting bit of that. For me, I want to hear from that guy.
And months of planning that goes into it is eye-opening,
Because presumably you can't do anything that will later draw attention to somebody combing through your bank history, etc., etc. I mean, how would you siphon off the money? Quietly, etc.
Are you thinking about it, Sarah?
Well, I love the idea of it. I do love the idea that you could potentially just drop off the face of the earth and nobody would ever know. But I wonder if it's possible.
So when I went to university, I don't know, I had this crazy idea that I just wanted to give myself a different name. But then one of the first people I bumped into in the corridor was someone I went to school with, so that ended that.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're never on your own. No. You're never on your own. My dad met somebody who used to work for him at the top of the Empire State Building. So there you go. That's, you just
it's
can't.
A small world.
You can't, exactly. You can never escape, can you? One that I think I would have quite a lot of trouble listening to next, which is Unheard, the Fred and Rose West tapes. Is it a hard listen?
Actually, I think it's just more, it's more like a reporter's insight, really. This is somebody who was working on the beat as a reporter, Sunday Mirror, back in '94, picked up the call, was just a general news reporter, and it turned out to be a tip-off from someone about this strange goings-on in this village of Gloucester, and then went over, and at that time he had a dictaphone, so he was recording everything on these cassette tapes, these micro cassette tapes, and of course it turned out to be a huge story, one of the biggest stories that he's ever worked on. Yeah. Now he's an author and he's dug out those tapes from storage, and you get to listen to some of these tapes. I've got to say, with this particular podcast, it's one that you probably want to put headphones on. It's maybe one that you don't want to listen to on public transport because they are quite bad quality, but he does kind of read back to you what they're actually saying. But from the perspective of people that kind of lodged with Fred and Rose West, young teenage girls, to hear in some of the interviews of Steve West, who was one of their sons, really different perspective of the case that I'd never really thought.
Let's have a listen to it. This is Howard Souness's first visit to the village where Fred and Rose West lived.
The left is Cromwell Street. Left is the house 25. Remarkably plain house from the front, just featureless, or just a box. Quite sandy-coloured rectangle. It's ugly. It's one of the darkest houses on the street. I'll speak to the church people. It is right next door after all. Bizarre that a killer lived next door to a church. People next door must have heard something, Contact the people at 23, the adjoining house. Bedrooms were just beside each other. Must have heard all sorts of noise. Screaming, shouting. Impossible not to have done.
It is deeply chilling, isn't it? But I found it interesting what he says about being more sympathetic than he was in his 20s and returning back to talk to the families of the dead, and how that now has such an impact on him. Because if you lose somebody in those circumstances, it's going to be something you carry with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, the 12 forgotten victims is what he calls it in that first episode. Yeah, really, really interesting. It's a production from Something Else. And I think it's 12 episodes. It's only got, I think 7 or 8 of them are out at the moment. So it's been released weekly. It's current, that one.
Yes.
So I look forward to listening to it. I'm not quite sure where it's going to end. Because you kind of know the end already, don't you? So I'm not quite sure where it's going to take me.
I presume it's just going to be those unheard stories from the families and from from their perspective. Because of course he killed himself, didn't he, in prison, and she's serving life sentences. So and then you have all of those people linked to those 12 girls' deaths that are having their own life sentences, presumably still.
Yeah.
Finally, we have got All Killa No Filla.
This is a very different one, right?
Hilarious.
I mean, I just had to throw something in that's going to at least make us laugh a little bit. After that one, I was like, where do I take this?
These two are brill.
So I don't know why, but I always end up listening to these guys when I'm doing my Tesco shop. Other supermarkets are available. But I was listening to them, and sometimes they go off on a tangent. They're just two female comedians who, in between their tours, they just sit down and talk about murderers, and they pick one per episode and just delve into a bit about who they were and what they found out about this person. But the conversation kind of goes off on a bit of a wander, as you find. They get easily distracted. Some of it is very rude, and there's plenty of swearing, which would we expect anything else from comedians? But I end up just walking around the aisles, just chuckling away to myself. And this is the most recent episode that we've taken a clip from.
Yeah, this is Kiri and Rachel talking about the serial killer, Jack Unterberger. Well, mostly.
So he was raised by his grandfather, who was an abusive alcoholic, and they lived in this sort of shack, wasn't it? Like a one-bedroomed cabin together.
Yeah, one of the reports describes his grandfather as a rough fellow, which is putting it mildly. He used to use Jack to steal animals. We don't know what.
More information. Don't skim over that bit.
Yeah, well, if it's sheep rustling, not interested. If it's dogs outside Tesco, stop it.
Yeah, hanging's too good for them.
Yeah.
A lot of that goes on where I'm from, because from the seaside, people go on holiday. A lot of people I know have had dogs stolen, where families from, let's say, Manchester and Liverpool, to
Well,
pick
they're
two
the surrounding areas
locations.
that mostly go there on holiday. I'm not
go,
offended.
Can we take this dog home? And yeah, the dog just disappears. In it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have collars on their dogs where we are because they're like, little farm dogs that stay on their farm.
I think it must be really horrible. Imagine being a dog being happy on Anglesey.
Yeah, literally being on a farm in Wales where we lie about where dogs go when they're dead, and then being in a 2 up, 2 down. Do you know what I mean? On like
in Bootle.
Yeah, in a cul-de-sac where you can't go outside in case you get hit by a car.
The tangents are part of the joy, aren't they?
Yeah, it is. It's just a lot of fun, which is very different, because true crime is one of those genres that Serial was the thing that made everybody listen to podcasts. It was that series, and looking at, I did a little bit of a Google, thinking, right, how many times was Serial listened to? And it said, as of September 2018, season 1 and season 2 have been downloaded 340 million times.
And that's last year.
That was last year. So, but little tip off, if you are a true crime fan, there's this new wave coming through which is called Copcasts, right? And I did discover, it's not seen it anywhere else, but New York Police Department have just started their own series, going back in some historic cases. So that's one that's my little tip off for you.
Well, we've got a minute, so let's have a little listen. This is a clip from one of those. This is Breaking the Case. This is the start of their first episode, Baby Hope, Into the Woods.
Inwood is all the way uptown, the last stop on the A train. It's at the top of Manhattan, the narrow tip of the island where the Harlem and Hudson rivers meet. Not much more than 100 years ago, the city looked like the country here, and it can still feel wild. Inwood Hill Park is almost 200 acres. If you're in the woods and you pretend not to hear the traffic, you could imagine you're someplace far away, or in a time before this was the city. On July 23, 1991, at around noon, 3 men were in the park. They were working on the highway just below the Henry Hudson Bridge. It was a Tuesday. Joe Rizzo was one of the guys working on the road.
Me, Bobby Perdue, and Timmy Ohm were walking down the lane. And as we're walking, we're all smoking cigarettes, and I noticed a cooler down off into the woods. I mean, barely see it. And Bobby wouldn't go down. Me and Timmy said, all right, let's go down and look. And it was leaning against a tree. So I had a shovel, and I popped the cooler open. And there was cans of Coke and a black plastic bag, and it was filled with water and maggots. And to this day, I still don't know why I did it. Instead of just walking away, I tipped the cooler over. Cans came out, the plastic bag came out, and then with my shovel, I gently cut the bag open.
Oof. And,
yeah. I kind of broke our rules a little bit by slipping that in because it's not British, but it's just out, and I thought it's my job to let you know the new little juicy jewels that are hidden away.
And it sounds excellent as well. New York Police Department podcast. Who's not going to be quite interested in that? Claire, thank you so much, as always, and sorry for keeping you a little bit later tonight. It's lovely to have you on the programme. As always, Claire